Hi, I'll pick up where I left off in the last video on the chapter on the Mordent from Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's Versuch über die wahre Art das Klavier zu spielen. Man hat noch eine besondere Art, den Mordenten, wenn ganz kurz sein soll, zu machen. C. Von diesen beiden zugleich angeschlagenen Noten wird allein die oberste gehalten. Die unterste hebt man gleich wieder auf. Dieser Ausdruck ist nicht zu verwerfen, solange als man ihn seltener als die anderen Mordenten anbringt. Kommt bloß ex abrupto. Das ist ohne Verbindung vor. Then there is a unique way to do the short mordent when it is meant to be completely short. And when Bach talks about short, I would say that he could also be talking about the keenness, the exactness, or the Schärfe. So, when the short mordent is meant to be completely sharp. We can see the execution notated in figure 72C. The two notes are struck simultaneously, and the lower is then lifted up, which leaves the upper note free to sound. And according to the notation, the lower B is held for half the value of the upper C. Grove, after turning it into something it's not, called it obsolete, which is another example of mediocrity attacking genius. It is not obsolete, it is the short mordent. It is an alternate way of executing it, which creates an effect similar to that if the notes of the short mordent were to be played with such extreme speed and sharpness that they become a blur. But a blur with a bite. Grove dismissed it. Here's what they wrote, and you can look that up in, if you type Mordent into Google, one of the options you can click on is from wiki sources, and it's the entry in Grove's A Dictionary for Music and Musicians. And there they talk about the mordent, the long mordent, and they have in that same entry, they talk about the pral trill. So Grove dismissed it, this alternate way of executing the short mordent. They write, besides the above, Emanuel Bach gave the name of mordent to two other graces, now nearly or quite obsolete. Bach didn't do that. He didn't give the name of mordent to another grace. He showed us an alternate way of performing the short mordent. That is misrepresentation what Grove is doing. So besides the above, Emanuel Bach gave the name of mordent to two other graces, now nearly or quite obsolete. One called the abbreviated mordent, pinche et touffé, and excuse the French. Sounds like et tu, Brute. So one called the abbreviated Mordent. I've just read the paragraph, and we've seen for ourselves that Bach didn't call it that. But what Grove is doing there is they're telling you what Bach was actually saying, or what he would have wanted to say had he been better informed. Had he been as informed as Grove are. Am I the only one who notices how condescending Grove are being? Notice their arrogance. It's like a bad teacher interrupting the brightest of pupils with corrections that are beyond pointless in how bad they are. So, one called the abbreviated Mordent was rendered by striking the auxiliary note together with its principal and instantly releasing it. Example 9. And you see their example, Bach's notation wasn't good enough for them apparently. They had to change it. It's unreal. How can you not imagine that's not deliberate? You know what happens when you know what'll happen if I were to see this through to the end and you were to get all the information, all the insight, all the wisdom I have to share. You'll be in a position where you will enjoy complete independence as an artist, and you will never need another lesson again your entire life. You won't even need, like consultation or anything. You'll be totally self-sufficient. Imagine how bad that is for, to be in a field where you create self-sufficiency in your clients. So if they were to deliberately feed you misinformation, it would mean keeping you in a state of dependency where you could be 50 years old and still longing or wanting a lesson from a teacher. I mean, that's a state of dependency that is ridiculous. It should set off warning bells, and there'll be a lot of people in that situation who never feel like they will always feel their entire life that they need a lesson. That's why they wouldn't be happy with me at all, and while they'll discourage me among students, because what's going to end up at the end of it is you'll be an independent artist and you'll be completely self-sufficient, and you will not be dependent. You won't need a lesson, and it won't even be like a forced thing. You will know. It'll be like a kid throwing away his suitor or getting rid of nappies. It won't be a painful thing. It won't be like a loss. It'll just be completely natural. And you'll never think back. You'll never think, oh, I wish I was wearing nappies again. Or I wish I was, wish I had a suitor again. So, they didn't even see, they didn't even get that right. So one called the abbreviated Mordent was rendered by striking the auxiliary note together with its principal and instantly releasing it. This grace, which is identical with the acciaccatura, it is not identical with the acciaccatura. That is a false statement. So this grace, which is identical with the... See, they don't even... they want to separate themselves from it being a Mordent because they know much better than Bach. They are in a position of superiority over Bach. Bach didn't say this grace. He didn't separate it from the Mordent. He's talking about an alternate way to play the short Mordent. It's still a short Mordent. Was said by Marburg to be of great service in playing full chords on the organ, but its employment is condemned by the best modern organists. And so it's a false statement. It's not at all like the Aki Akatura. So what Marburg was talking about as being a great service in playing full chords on the organ is not the same as what Bach talked about in that paragraph at all. And the best modern organists, no surprise they condemn it, because they're in the cage. They only know notes and noise, and they can only relate to things that are in the cage, and nothing exists in the cage except notes and noise. And so what Marburg is talking about doesn't exist in the cage. So of course they're going to condemn it. And they know subconsciously, I mean, they know that all they're doing is playing notes and noise, that they have no idea how to turn an organ into an orchestra or anything like that. They are just playing the notes and making noise. And so they are very conscious of extra noise being introduced there, because they already know that all they're doing is making noise with notes. And so of course they're going to condemn it, because they do not know what can be achieved on an organ. So terrible account there. And it has to be, some of it has to be deliberate. It's so beyond the pale. And there you get to see it. And if you read on in the Prowl Trill, and if you've seen the videos I've presented, the Prowl Trill scam, and been with me through that, you are going to see how horrifying the misinformation is in that. And Grove, a dictionary of music and musicians, when I was studying in my university, in the library, there was Grove's a dictionary for music and musicians. I mean, it's I don't know about anymore, but it was always present. Bach said this way of playing the short mordent is not to be dismissed or spurned or rejected. Dieser Ausdruck ist nicht zu verwerfen. But when he says that to Grove, he is talking to the roll of honor. He is talking to mediocrity. He said it is not to be dismissed as long as one uses it less frequently than the other mordents. That it comes ex abrupto, or without connection. And without connection could mean without any slurring or legato. As we have seen earlier in the Versuch, ex abrupto can also mean at the beginning of a piece. There is an example of the short mordent being used not only ex abrupto by Bach's father in his C minor toccata, BWV 911, but also without connection. There'll be, I'd say, roughly 2 ways this could be played. With the short mordent as it is usually performed. That's one way. And then, as was suggested to me back in the day by my harpsichord teacher in Ireland, in keeping with the ideas of Stylus Fantasticus, as found in the toccatas and fantasies of Frescobaldi, for example, with their measured and unmeasured sections, and the improvisatory nature of, or free form of such sections, the idea of which I loved at the time, to play it as a long mordent, slowly building the speed. So when I first was, discovered that piece, and there was a guy studying with me who played it, and so that's what drew my attention to it. And then I brought it to the harpsichord lessons, and when I heard, well, I can't remember exactly how I started learning it, but when I'd heard recordings or the usual way it's played, I thought it's very dry and like very much like a finger exercise. And that short Mordent and all, it was underwhelming. And so then the idea of it being being free, and my teacher had also said that you could, divide it up between the hands, and starting off with a long Mordent, it really felt to me like a dramatic start, and full of unexpected, a sense of surprise. And and he'd give suggestions about practicing it, like he'd say to try it playing it happy and leggero, or emotional sad, or adagio, or playing it metrical, or having extreme changes in the speed. And I loved that, because the idea of breaking it up between the hands, I don't know if I can demonstrate that now, because it doesn't in actuality it doesn't work. But then I wasn't able to see the greater arc of the phrase back then, so I loved it, and I was anxious. I had this sort of technique that where I'd be worried about such writing, such notes, because I'd be thinking about evenness. I'd be thinking of practicing with the metronome, of doing all that, and so something like that was unattractive to me with the technique I had, and so I loved that idea, or that way of approaching it. So imagine Bach was giving a masterclass on that piece. To those playing the long Mordent variation, he might say that the short Mordent, indicated in the score, is never lengthened. So he might point that out for, that student to think about. While he might not disagree entirely about the improvisatory character of that opening, he might point out that the notes have been divided up in the bar, and that an improvisatory nature might not be what people conceive an improvisatory nature to be. I say might because I've no idea what he'd actually say. I'm just guessing. But there, the improvisatory nature, and I just want to say something about that, because you get that a lot in master classes, or generally you'll see if somebody's playing a piece like Mozart's Fantasy or something, there'll always be a reference to it's not sounding like it's sounding too practiced, and it doesn't sound, it should sound more improvised. And I think there's a misconception there about, and these masterclass givers, these people, they are in the cage, they are the roll of honor. They have no clue what improvisation and improvisatory nature is. And I think the misconception is that it's like there's a sort of a hesitation or meandering in a way, like a pause, like the way it was recommended to me to approach that opening of the kate, with extreme changes in tempo. That's what happens, suddenly you'll go slow and then you'll go fast, and that's not what improvisation is. What the improvisatory nature is the, let's say in a free sort of a form, like a fantasy or something. It's the lack of bar lines. It's not, it's not sort of hesitating and moving on quickly and hesitating in the notes. And I know that because in the third movement of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, I decorate the fermata in that. It's uploaded on YouTube. I decorate the fermata. And what I did there, I made that up on the spot in that moment. I didn't have it prepared. I made it up on the spot. And you can hear from that if you were to, that you'd be able to notate the values of every note. And it doesn't get more improvised than that. And what is there in that is the lack of bar lines. There's no bar lines. But it's not, the meandering sort of. It's not the idea that I get that the roll of honor are trying to push or trying to throw the students into uncertainty or whatever. And I don't even want to go into that. It's a horrible they employ dirty tactics against you, pretending to be your friend, and they do everything to undermine your confidence. It's like, it's the equivalent of the tricks you'll hear in interviews, the way you'll get the employer will put the chair that that makes a farting noise when you sit down, and all these tricks to put you in a position of inferiority and insecure, to undermine your confidence and stuff. The roll of honor masterclass people use all those dirty tricks while pretending to be your friend. And I did the same as well for the Mozart's Rondo and Polonaise. There's as well a fermata to be decorated. And that, again, I made that up on the spot. I hadn't got it prepared. And you can again hear what that's like. And it sounds like I could have prepared it. It sounds like I could have been practicing it. It sounds like I played it perfectly. And one thing that you do hear that will give it away that it was made up on the spot is that B, above middle C on this piano is one of the keys that are worse, and it doesn't play pianissimo. And normally, if I was preparing that, I don't have it's off all the time, like what keys are bad at doing what. And so there I was just, I was in the world of music and playing the music and not thinking about, hold on, what can this piano do? And so I played the pianissimo, and of course the B sounds, but you can see here what a pianissimo is like on that piano, on that key, that there is no tone there whatsoever. It's just it's a weak tone. It's like it chokes. It's not precise enough, so it chokes, and it's smothered rather than ringing through. Yeah. That's an improvisatory nature, and not the idea of just like pulling things around as you like. So Bach might point out that the notes have been divided up in the bar, and that is not to be ignored. And the improvisatory nature is in the character of what Bach wrote, and not in how some roll of honor person is going to pull it around as they like, with a total disregard to note values or whatever that comes along. Yeah. And I had to decorate the fermatas in both of them. In the Mozart, I mean, he set it up so perfectly, so beautifully, it felt like a crime not to decorate that. And honestly, I didn't want to. I wasn't happy doing it, because for one thing, I'm not so confident about it. And the other thing is that I didn't think it was fair that it's going to get recorded, and like these things, when they're done on the spot without any preparation, they should exist in the moment and never again. But this was getting recorded, so I wasn't so happy about the idea of that. But I'm glad, and you can see how important it is for the piece. And the same. And the same is with Beethoven. I mean, he set it up perfectly. Not as exquisitely, I'd say, in this situation as Mozart did, but he did it, perfectly too. And it as well is hugely important for the piece, because the whole effect of that A flat major at the end is completely lost without that decorated fermata. And you can hear that in Kissin's performance of that third movement. It's small. It's a Lilliput performance, and it's yeah. It transforms it, the decorated fermata. But that's another failing of the Roll of Honour and their teaching. That's not done. And you can see Kissin a victim of that. And that's his legacy. Not that I'm feeling sorry for him, but you know, you'd think he could deserve more, because you might not think so, agree with it, but your kids and your grandchildren are going to think differently about it when they look back, when they know what's, you know, on the horizon. That whole era is going to be looked at as an example of the cage. I think as well, you know, the atonal music and all the composers, what they were doing, they were, I think subconsciously, unconsciously, expressing being in the cage, where nothing exists except notes and noise, and the mediocrity Lilliput took over. You know, it was eroding into the, you know, Chopin and Liszt and all, and eventually it just took over. And what did composers do in the cage? They reduced their music to nothing but notes and noise. It became obvious that that's all it was. There was nothing else there except notes and noise, and they were expressing that, and that is going to be understood later as that is that period. It's a dark ages where the cage has won. And it has to come to an end. So we're in the masterclass with Bach. So after he's, you know, he says that the short mordent is never to be lengthened, and he points out the bar lines. He then might suggest performing that opening mordent that way he described in this paragraph. It could be providing a rhythmic immediacy or impetus, which could better kickstart the pulse that is hard to achieve when executing the mordent the normal way. That could be an answer to the question, when should the mordent be completely short? You know, in response to Bach saying, "Man hat noch eine besondere Art, den Mordenten, wenn ganz kurz sein soll, zu machen." So when is that? Well, it could be when rhythmic precision is required or welcomed. When a concentrated schärfe is required, especially when one is dealing with the ornament on 2 white keys or 2 black keys. Such a scenario could as well be more likely the case with the sort of notes that are detached or non-legato. So notes that are detached or non-legato might be more likely to require sort of a rhythmic precision. And Karl could as well, in that masterclass, be in fact sharing with us how his father, Johann Sebastian Bach himself, might have performed that opening. How could Johann Sebastian Bach's way of performing his toccata ever be nearly or quite obsolete. His way of performing his toccata will be the definitive way to perform his toccata. It will be the definitive answer. What you get with AC fingering, AC finger position, and the true way to play the piano, what will be channeled through you is the true playing of the composer whose piece it is you're performing. Bach said in paragraph 1 from his introduction, Zur wahren Art das Klavier zu spielen, gehören hauptsächlich 3 Stücke, welche so genau miteinander verbunden sind, dass eines ohne das andere weder sein kann noch darf. Nämlich die rechte Fingersetzung, die guten Manieren und der gute Vortrag. AC fingering, the only complete solution to fingering, has its place in that trinity. Mozart is channeled. I'm a conduit. It's Mozart. When I play Mozart, it's not me playing, it's Mozart playing. When I play Beethoven, it's not me playing, it's Beethoven playing. And those decorations of the fermata, that was Beethoven decorating that fermata, not me. And in the other one, it was Mozart decorating the fermata. And you can see how the two, they were different. They had a different approach to it.